You are muted, Tahlai.
Yeah, am I unmuted now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think that there are, SK raised a lot of interesting points. And in preparation for this interview, actually, I have spoken with some people who have some expertise in this area, in macroeconomics and political economy and all that. And the one point that they invariably made to me was that this shouldn't have come as a surprise to anybody, because Abiy has been um, signaling that he was going to go along this direction for a long time. They mentioned that when he said, for instance, borrowing money from IMF is like, what was the thing that he infamously or famously said, borrowing from IMF was like borrowing from your own mother. That was his way of saying he was completely aligning with whatever prescription the IMF and the World Bank and other blenders were giving him. And when he said that he would die for America, to this American journalist, I forgot his name. I think his correspondent for the New Yorker magazine, if I'm not mistaken. So you connect all these dots, and the picture that emerges of Abiy is of someone who is not just willing to do whatever IMF tells him to do, but also who thinks whatever they say is a good thing. And the one surprise to them is that this has come as a surprise to a lot of people, and it shouldn't have. It was just that he was obstructed and delayed by a number of things, the war and other things. Otherwise, this was something that was always going to happen. In terms of what Abiy said by way of trying to explain to his what he called stakeholders, it was interesting, by the way, the people that he assembled. He assembled the people who are more or less in the PP. So he was preaching to the choir in a way. Although interestingly, Burhanu Negam was also in attendance. And again, in preparation for this interview, I watched an interview that Burhanu Negam gave 3 years ago, where he categorically said that neoliberalism or this prescription was something that Ethiopia should reject with all its might. But of course, today you would expect him to say that this is the best thing since sliced bread. So there's a lot of things happening. But one more point in terms of the optics. This is a continuation of the first question you asked me, Getachew. If you carefully see the demeanor of Abiy Ahmed, he was flailing around. He was very angry. You could see that this is not something that he thought out properly, and you could see that he was desperate. And for Abiy Ahmed to say that there could be negative consequences for 1 year, he said that this is a bitter pill and that it could hit the poorest the hardest for 1 year. For Abiy Ahmed to admit any sort of negativity, it tells you how desperate he is. Because normally Abiy Ahmed doesn't say that anything he introduces has any negative aspects. He's not the sort of person who is aware of negativity. But for him to say that tells you how desperate the regime is. But also, Mama Muhraso, I think the governor of the central bank, if nobody had told you he was the governor of the central bank, if you just listened to him, you would think that he was giving a hostage video. You could see that he didn't really understand what was happening. He was really worried. On his facial expression wasn't right. So there is an element of desperation on the Abiy Ahmed's officials. But I think the wider point is easy to get bogged down in the details about the neoliberal prescriptions, whether or not they are good, whether there is merit to them after all, whether they could work in certain circumstances. There's a lot of debate to be had, and I think economists and people who have expertise, and maybe Faisal and Ezekiel could go into the details. Certainly, I don't feel qualified to go into that, but I think this is a subject that you could reason from first principles. You don't need any qualification to actually see that this is a disaster for Ethiopia. Because what are they saying? So ultimately everything in economics boils down to what people believe. When you go to a store with 10 birr note, for instance, and try to buy banana, the reason the banana seller accepted the note is because he believes that there is value in the note. Ultimately, that is what things come down to. But now what we are saying is we have dollar and we have the birr in parallel. and the birr is tied to a country that people believe is from time to time becoming more unstable, is not attracting any investment, and you have given them an opportunity to own dollars. So obviously everybody who could afford to buy dollars is going to go to dollars. It's just straightforward, right? And what that would mean is that the birr would just fall and fall and fall, and that the spiral will continue and continue until the whole thing crashes. So it's very, very easy actually to see that this doesn't work in Ethiopia, because for these prescriptions to have a chance of working, there should be some preconditions that must have been met, and that is that the country should be stable. People should believe that there is a competent government. People should believe that this is a government. This is a government that would attract FDI. This is a government that would incentivize industries in the country that would ultimately export. So people must believe these things for the whole thing to have a chance of working. But of course, nobody serious in Ethiopia would believe any of these things. So it's easy, without being an expert, it's easy to see that the whole thing is just the wrong idea at the wrong time. I say at the wrong time because if the Ethiopian government was competent, maybe we could have been debating on the merits of the prescriptions. I know, do they work? Do they not work? What is the drawback? What is the pro and all that? But now the condition is not simply there for us to have that debate. But one thing that I couldn't wrap my head around, and I would really like to hear what Eskiel and Faisal will have to say, is what is the thinking on the part of the IMF? Now, people say two things. One, the most sort of cynical view of the IMF is that it is a Western tool that goes around poor countries and makes them even more poor. So it's a tool that the Western countries use to keep Africa and other countries impoverished and oppressed, right? That is one extreme view. The other view is that the IMF represents the interest of private entities, a lot of market entities, and in the name of lending, actually, it is advancing the interest of some Western entities. And normally, when you want to understand what the IMF and World Bank are trying to achieve in a given country, you have to try to identify who are the private entities who are trying to make profit from this. That is normally what people tell you in these things. And probably the truth is somewhere in between. But I couldn't for the life of me understand what the interest of the IMF could be in Ethiopia in relation to the reform that they are pushing in Ethiopia. Because like I said, for me, this is a country that is going to just implode. It's a matter of time. It's easy to see for me. And I would expect the IMF people to understand that. So I don't quite understand what it is that they are trying to do. And one final point, maybe slightly unrelated in terms of the negotiation that Abiy mentioned. I think there are two things to mention here. One is Abiy is known for trying this, time-tested gimmick or trick of divide and conquer, and it has worked in Tigray. He has created a wedge between the interim administration and the TPLF, and they don't now trust one another, and that has served Abiy well. And he has used the same trick in Oromia as well with regards to the OLF, and he's trying to do probably the same with the FANO by saying that he is negotiating with some elements of the FANO. Some elements in the FANO are now going to think that their comrades are actually behind the scene, behind their back, negotiating with Abiy, and that is going to create an element of mutual suspicion. That is, of course, good for him. That is one thing. I think the other point to mention in terms of negotiation and Abiy is he has a completely different conception of negotiation, Abiy Ahmed. When he says that he's negotiating with OLF, for instance, what he means is that he's trying to give some positions to OLF people, and if they accept the positions, then that is his idea of negotiation. It's not conceding to some of the demands of the OLF movement. So he has a completely different notion of negotiation. It was long-winded, but I hope I have answered.
Okay.